Easy, easy.
Maya, what do we do?
Stay behind me, Em. Don't move.
Oh my God.
I got you. Just breathe.
The billionaire witnessed his black nanny shielding his little daughter from street dogs, and then the sun had barely started to dip behind the towering glass skyscrapers of downtown Chicago, but the air felt thick with tension. As the city's pulse quickened in the evening rush, a scene unfolded on a narrow street that no one expected. A wealthy businessman on his way to an important dinner would never forget the night he witnessed something that would change everything. Liam Walker, the billionaire real estate mogul, stepped out of his high-end SUV, his polished shoes clicking on the wet pavement. He had no idea his life was about to be torn apart by a single horrifying moment. His eyes scanned the familiar street as the wind carried the scent of food trucks and distant car exhaust. But it wasn't the typical city hustle that grabbed his attention. It was the scream. A scream that was so raw, so filled with terror, it froze him in his tracks. Without thinking, he rushed toward the sound. What he saw was a nightmare in broad daylight. There, in the middle of the street, stood his nanny, Maya, a black woman in her early 30s, holding his 5-year-old daughter, Emily, close to her chest. But it wasn't just any moment of protection. No, Maya was holding her ground against a pack of wild street dogs, nasty, snarling beasts with their teeth bared, closing in with the kind of hunger you only see in animals desperate to survive. But it wasn't the dogs that took Liam's breath away. It was Maya's eyes. There was something fierce in them, something that had nothing to do with the situation at hand. She wasn't just fighting for Emily. She was fighting for something much deeper, something buried beneath the surface. As Liam rushed to intervene, the question burned in his mind. Why did Maya seem so different than he had ever known her to be? And more chillingly, how much had she been hiding from him all along? But as Maya's fierce gaze met his, he felt the weight of an unspoken truth. In that moment, it was as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. And when it did, it would be too late. Liam Walker had always been the type of guy who ran his life like a well-oiled machine. Born into privilege, his days were filled with luxury and control, an empire built on ambition, money, and power. You could find him at the hottest spots in Chicago, or on a private jet headed to meetings in London, Paris, or New York. To the world, he was a picture of success. But behind the polished facade, his life had a crack, a flaw he tried hard to ignore. And that flaw had a name: Maya. Maya Williams had been in Liam's life for as long as he could remember. He hired her when Emily was just a baby, and now at 30, Maya was practically family. She had become the calm, steady presence in Emily's chaotic little world. He could see it in the way she'd handle tantrums and soothe nightmares, always patient, always calm. But it was more than that. Maya had this quiet strength about her, a resilience Liam admired, even if he never truly understood it. He never asked about her past, never questioned the quiet pride that radiated off of her. Maya was just Maya. She fit into their world like a fixture, never drawing attention to herself, never demanding anything. And Liam thought that was exactly how things should be. But that was before that day. The Walker family lived in a luxury penthouse on the top floor of one of the tallest buildings in Chicago. The view from their windows was nothing short of spectacular, a vast, sprawling skyline that shimmered in the light of day and glowed with a soft golden hue at night. Their home was filled with expensive art, high-end furniture, and the kind of trinkets that you only see in places where money flows like water. Liam's world was one of privilege in excess, but that didn't mean there weren't cracks in his perfect life. There was a distance in his marriage, a coldness that had settled between him and his wife, Danielle. Danielle was the daughter of one of Liam's biggest business partners. She was beautiful, successful in her own right, but their marriage had always felt like a business deal, a partnership of convenience. Their relationship was built on appearances, not love. They'd had their moments, but it was clear that the magic had long since fizzled out. Danielle spent most of her time managing social media accounts, attending gala events, and wearing the latest designer outfits. She had her own life, her own world, and Liam often found himself drifting further away from her. The only real connection he had left was Emily, his daughter, who had his heart wrapped around her tiny finger. It was Maya who seemed to understand this dynamic better than anyone else. She was Emily's world, and for the most part, Maya had become Liam's silent confidant. When he was frustrated, she was the one who calmed him down, When things went wrong in his business, she was the one who listened without judgment. But something about Maya's quiet strength seemed to be a constant reminder of the gap between the life he lived and the life she came from. It wasn't that Liam was a racist. He wasn't. He didn't even think about race much at all. But that didn't mean he wasn't blind to the differences between his world and Maya's. She didn't fit the mold of the people he interacted with on a daily basis, the millionaires and CEOs, the socialites, the power players. Maya was different. She came from the South Side, a neighborhood that Liam only ever visited if he had to. He'd never been to her house, never met her family, and never pushed for any real details about her past. To Liam, Maya was part of his life, but she was still an outsider. She wasn't one of them. It wasn't until that afternoon that he truly saw her. That day had started like any other. Liam had been in meetings all morning, his mind constantly buzzing with new deals, new opportunities, and the kind of stress only billionaires could understand. But at the end of the day, when the dust had settled, he decided to take a break. He stepped out onto the balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand, and looked down at the streets below. Chicago, with its endless rhythm, its hum of life, always made him feel alive. But as the sun dipped behind the skyline, something inside him stirred. He glanced over at Maya, who was in the living room playing with Emily. Her laughter, soft and warm, echoed across the space, and for a moment, Liam felt a pang of something, regret, maybe. He had everything, but it was clear that the things that truly mattered were slipping through his fingers. What Liam didn't know was that Maya was about to reveal something that would change everything. She wasn't just the nanny. She wasn't just a woman who'd been a fixture in his life. She had a past, a history, a story that Liam had never asked about. And that story, as he would soon find out, was something he could never have imagined. It was a story of survival, of secrets, of a world that Liam had only ever seen through the lens of privilege. The weeks after that tense moment on the street felt like the calm before a storm. But it was an eerie calm, like the kind you feel right before a hurricane hits. Liam tried to push the image of Maya standing there, bravely protecting Emily from the street dogs, out of his mind. But it kept creeping back into his thoughts. Every time he saw her, there was this weight in the air. Maya was different. She had always been calm, even-tempered, but now there was something else behind her eyes. A quiet defiance, a sense that she was holding something back. And the more Liam tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at him. It wasn't until one afternoon, during a visit to one of his real estate developments, that the first real crack appeared. Liam had been making his rounds, as usual, inspecting the site with his team, when a situation arose that he didn't expect. He was walking past a group of workers when one of them, a guy who looked to be in his mid-40s, muttered something under his breath. It wasn't loud enough to hear, but Liam, ever the businessman, noticed the tension in the worker's body language. It was something small, something that would have slipped past anyone else, but Liam wasn't like anyone else. His instincts told him something was off. "Everything all right here, Joe?" Liam asked, his voice casual but sharp. The man, Joe, quickly straightened up and gave Liam a tight smile. Yeah, everything's fine, Mr. Walker." Liam wasn't convinced. The tone in his voice had been off. Liam had been dealing with people like Joe for years. The man's tone screamed discomfort. But it wasn't until he turned to head back to his car that the truth hit him like a slap across the face. He overheard Joe talking to another worker, someone who had been standing nearby, and the words, "It's a damn shame. Letting a woman like that work for the Walkers, especially one like her," slipped through the air like daggers. Liam's heart sank. He knew exactly who they were talking about. Maya. There it was, the first taste of the quiet prejudice that had been festering just beneath the surface all along. Liam had always prided himself on being open-minded, progressive even. He'd never seen Maya's race as anything other than part of who she was. But now the truth was laid bare in front of him. There were people, his people, who didn't see Maya the way he did. They saw her for what she was, a black woman, a nanny, and that was all they cared to see. The thought gnawed at him, but it didn't fully sink in until he got home that evening. He walked through the front door, greeted by the familiar sounds of Maya and Emily, their laughter echoing from the living room. He stood in the doorway, watching them for a moment. Maya was playing a game of pretend with Emily, something they did often. Emily's little giggles filled the air, and Maya's voice was soft, nurturing. It was such a simple moment, yet it hit Liam with a sense of realization that left him frozen. But it wasn't the sweetness of the moment that caught his attention. It was something deeper. Maya was a fixture in his life, but had he really seen her? Had he really heard her? Was she truly an equal in his home, or was she just playing a role? The quiet prejudice of Joe's words echoed in his mind, letting a woman like that work for the Walkers as if Maya were a charity case. As if she didn't belong in the space she'd made for herself in their lives. Liam watched her with Emily for another moment, and something shifted in his gut. It wasn't just that she was different from the people he surrounded himself with. It was that he had taken her for granted, used her for convenience. He'd never asked Maya about her life. He'd never asked about her background, her struggles. He'd never even considered the possibility that she could be anything more than the nanny who took care of his daughter. The weight of that realization hit him hard, but it was just the beginning of a series of uncomfortable moments that would slowly unravel the fabric of his world. A few days later, he took Emily out for an afternoon at the park, hoping for some father-daughter bonding. As they walked across the grass, Liam caught sight of a couple of familiar faces from his business world. Men who were always so eager to network, always laughing and exchanging handshakes. They waved him over, and he did what he always did, smiled, shook their hands, and exchanged pleasantries. But the moment he turned back to Emily, one of the men, a slick-haired entrepreneur named Mark, made a comment that caught him off guard. "Ah, man, you got one of those." "A nanny's, huh?" Mark said with a chuckle, as if it was a joke. Liam felt a chill run through him. His back straightened, but he kept his cool. "Yeah, Maya's been with us for years. She's great with Emily." Mark raised an eyebrow. Right. I guess it's nice having someone like that around, you know, keeping things under control, especially when you've got so much on your plate, huh?" Liam's jaw clenched and he could feel the heat rise in his face. He could tell Mark wasn't trying to be outright disrespectful, but the comment, dripping with that unspoken bias, was enough to make Liam's blood boil. "She's not like that, Mark," Liam said, his tone colder than usual. "Maya's more than just a nanny. She's family." Mark seemed taken aback for a moment, but then he shrugged it off with a half-smile. "Yeah, of course. I mean, sure, whatever works for you." But it didn't sit right with Liam. Every time he thought about it, the more he realized that this was the way everyone in his life saw Maya, someone who didn't belong, someone who was only ever going to be on the sidelines. And what made it worse was that Liam hadn't even noticed it before. The microaggressions, the misunderstandings, the way people treated Maya like she was just a hired hand. It all started to unravel in front of him. And as he looked at his daughter playing so happily with Maya, he knew something had to change. But Liam didn't know how deep the prejudice ran. He didn't know that this was just the beginning, an appetizer, if you will, to the truth that was about to come crashing down on him. And as much as he tried to silence the doubts creeping into his mind, they grew louder with each passing day. Liam had barely slept the night after the park incident. His mind was racing with thoughts of Maya, the way people had treated her, and the silent weight that had been building in his life for so long. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The microaggressions, the quiet prejudice that seemed to be woven into the fabric of his world that was supposed to be inclusive, progressive, and enlightened. And yet Maya had always been invisible to him, despite everything she did for his family. The next morning, he tried to go through his usual routine, work calls, meetings, the daily grind, but everything felt off. He couldn't focus. He kept replaying the words Mark had casually thrown his way. He kept hearing the way Joe had spoken about Maya, like she was something disposable, a token. He was supposed to be better than that, wasn't he? Supposed to stand for something bigger, but it hit him like a truck. He hadn't done anything. He had just stood there, letting it happen. He had done nothing. Later that afternoon, as Liam stepped into the elevator of his office building, he bumped into Danielle, his wife. She was dressed in a sleek business suit, her makeup impeccable, but there was a coolness in her eyes that made Liam uneasy. It had been building for weeks now, this distance between them. But now, as they stood in the elevator together, it felt like a chasm. "You've been distant," Danielle said, her voice cold but sharp.
What's going on with you?
Liam hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's Maya. There's something I haven't noticed. Something I've been blind to." He rubbed his temples, his frustration growing. I'm starting to realize how I've taken her for granted, how I've let other people treat her like she's just there. And I've done nothing about it. I don't know why it's taken me this long to see it. Danielle raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Maya's just the nanny, right? You're making a big deal out of nothing. Liam's frustration flared. No, it's not nothing. It's everything. She's not just the nanny, Danielle. She's been a part of our family for years. And yet people, my people, treat her like she's nothing. Like she's disposable. Danielle crossed her arms. Liam, it's not that deep. You're overthinking this. Maya has a job and she does it well. End of story. Liam felt his anger rise. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His own wife, someone he'd known for years, was brushing off what he'd just discovered. It was like she couldn't see the problem because she'd never had to. She didn't have to deal with people like Mark or Joe. She didn't have to deal with the subtle racism that crept into every conversation, every interaction, like a cancer. He wanted to scream, to explain, to make her understand, but he didn't. Instead, he just looked at her, silence hanging heavy between them. Liam walked out of the office building that evening with a sense of resolve in his chest. This wasn't just about Maya anymore. It was about a systemic issue, a larger problem that had been festering in the shadows of his life for far too long. He had known about it, but he hadn't seen it. Now he couldn't unsee it. When he got home, Maya was already there, sitting on the couch with Emily. They were playing a game, laughing softly as they went back and forth. Maya looked up when he entered, her smile fading slightly as she saw the tension in his face. Is everything okay, Mr. Walker? He hesitated, then sat down beside her. No, Maya, it's not. I've been blind to how things have been, and it's not right. I've let people treat you like you're less. I've let this happen, and I'm sorry. Maya didn't say anything for a long moment. She just looked at him, her eyes full of something Liam couldn't quite place. It was a mixture of hurt and understanding, of resignation. Finally she spoke. It's not your fault, Mr. Walker. This is just the way things are. I've learned to live with it. Liam felt a lump form in his throat. No, Maya, it's not just the way things are. It doesn't have to be. I'm going to make it right. You deserve better than this. The air between them was thick, filled with years of unspoken words, of missed opportunities to make things right. Maya looked down at her hands, and for the first time, Liam noticed how tightly her fingers were clenched. She had been holding everything together for so long, and now in this moment, it felt like she was finally letting go. I don't know if anything can change. Mr. Walker, Maya said quietly, almost too softly for him to hear. Sometimes people just don't see you no matter how hard you try. And sometimes they never will. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. She'd been living in a world where she wasn't seen, where her worth was constantly questioned, and Liam had never once stopped to see her. Not truly. I'll do everything I can to change that, Liam said, his voice steady. I swear to you, Maya, things will be different. As he sat there, he realized that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Maya had been pushed to the margins of his world, and undoing that would take time. But he wasn't about to sit back and pretend it wasn't a problem anymore. This wasn't just about Maya. This was about all the people who had been silenced, who had been made invisible in his world, in his country, just because of the color of their skin. He had seen it now, and he wasn't going to turn away from it. The evening had come too quickly. It was one of those humid Chicago nights where the heat clung to your skin like a suffocating blanket, and the buzzing of the city felt amplified under the heavy sky. Liam walked through the front door of his penthouse, trying to shake off the weight of the day. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Maya, the painful reality of how blind he had been, how much he had taken for granted. He promised himself he would do better, make things right, but the fear of making it worse loomed like a shadow. He walked into the living room, where Emily and Maya were sitting on the floor playing a game. The scene should have been a warm one. Maya and Emily, their laughter filling the room, should have been the picture of peace, but it wasn't. There was something in the air, something thick and heavy that made it feel like the calm before the storm. Mr. Walker? Maya's voice broke through the silence, her tone hesitating, as if she had something important to say. Liam turned to face her. He could see the strain in her eyes. She was on edge, like she was holding something back, something she hadn't shared yet. Maya, what's wrong? He asked, trying to mask the concern in his voice. He took a step toward her, but she stood up quickly, her body tense. Nothing. It's just... Maya paused, then glanced over at Emily, who was now looking up at them with confusion. It's just that things can't stay like this, Mr. Walker. You can't fix this. You can't undo the things that have been said. People don't change overnight. Liam's heart clenched. He had wanted to fix things, to make everything right, but it felt like Maya was slipping away from him. He didn't know how to reach her anymore, how to get through to her. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, cutting through the tension in the room. It was too late for anyone to be stopping by, but Liam opened the door without hesitation. What he didn't expect was the group standing on the other side. Mark and a few of the guys from his business circle, looking like they were on a mission. "Mr. Walker," Mark said, his grin tight and smug. "You got a minute?" "We need to talk." Liam stood frozen for a moment. He wasn't in the mood for another round of their bullshit. But Mark wasn't going to take no for an answer. Without waiting for Liam to speak, he barged into the living room, followed by the others. The tension in the room immediately shifted. Emily stood up, her eyes wide with confusion, and Maya's body went rigid, her gaze flicking nervously between Liam and the newcomers. "Yo, what the hell's going on?" Mark's voice was loud, almost taunting as he looked at Maya. "Is this how things go in your house now? You got your, nanny running the show?" He smirked, a sick gleam in his eye. "Tell me, does she actually take care of your kid, or is she just cleaning up the mess?" Liam felt his stomach twist. This wasn't happening. Not now, not here. But as Mark's words sank in, the reality of what was happening set in. They weren't here to just have a friendly conversation. They were here to make a statement. Before Liam could respond, another of the men, a younger guy with a baseball cap on, chimed in, his words dripping with contempt. "Man, you really let her talk to your kid like that. What's the world coming to?" He looked at Maya, his voice low and full of judgment. "Is that what you think is acceptable? Teaching kids that it's okay to let people like you into their lives?" Maya took a step back, her eyes flicking toward Liam for some kind of reassurance, but Liam was speechless. The words they were throwing at her were too much. It was as if they didn't even see her as human. They just saw the color of her skin and her role as a nanny, and that's all they cared about. Liam felt the heat in his chest, a fury rising inside him that he hadn't allowed himself to feel until now. These weren't just friends. These were the people he had trusted, the people who were part of his world, and they were disrespecting Maya, disrespecting the woman who had helped raise his daughter. "Enough," Liam shouted, his voice booming through the room, shocking everyone into silence. "You have no right to speak to her like that. She's not some object for you to mock, and you sure as hell don't get to disrespect her in my house." The men stood there momentarily stunned, as if they hadn't expected Liam to react. Mark's grin faltered, but only for a second. He took a step forward, his face hardening. "You really gonna let a nobody talk to us like that? A black woman of all people acting like she's something special? You got a problem, Walker." Liam felt a surge of rage flood through him. This wasn't just about Maya anymore. This was about everything that had been festering beneath the surface. Everything that he had allowed to happen. He wasn't going to stay silent anymore. "I've had enough," Liam said, his voice low but firm. "You want to talk to her like that? You can leave. Right now." The words were out before he could stop them, and as the weight of his own words hung in the air, he realized what this moment meant. It was more than standing up for Maya. It was about standing up for what was right, standing up for the people who had been silenced for far too long. Mark and the others didn't say anything for a moment. The silence was deafening, and Liam could feel the pressure building as they exchanged looks. Finally, Mark shook his head. "Fine, but this isn't over, Walker. You don't get to act like you're some hero protecting the poor little maid. People are going to talk, and you can't stop that." Liam didn't care. Let them talk. He wasn't going to sit back anymore and let people like them tear apart the woman who had been there for his daughter. The woman who had been more than just a nanny. She had been a protector, a guide, and a friend. As Mark and the others left, Liam turned to Maya, his chest still tight with anger. "I'm sorry, Maya," he said, his voice shaky. "I should have done this sooner." Maya looked at him, her face a mix of exhaustion and relief. She didn't say anything at first. She just nodded, her eyes softening as she finally spoke. "You did the right thing, Mr. Walker." But Liam could see it in her eyes. This moment, this confrontation had been building for so long. He had failed her for too long. And as the door closed behind the last of the men, he realized just how deep the damage went. This wasn't just about Maya. This was about the world they lived in. A world that was still so quick to tear people down based on the color of their skin. And he couldn't fix that. Not yet, but he would fight to change it. For her, for Emily, for everyone who had been ignored, overlooked, and silenced for far too long. The days after that confrontation were a blur for Liam. The house felt different, quieter in some ways, louder in others. Maya had left that evening after Mark and his group had left, and although she assured him that she needed time to think, Liam couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at him. It wasn't just the anger that had flared up in that moment. It was the realization that he had spent years ignoring what was right in front of him. He had ignored the small things, the microaggressions that added up over time, and in doing so, he had allowed Maya to be silenced by the very system that he had helped create. For a few days, he didn't hear from Maya. The silence between them felt heavy, oppressive. But finally a message came through, just a simple text. "We need to talk." Liam knew what that meant. She had to leave. He had expected it, but it didn't make it any easier. Maya had built a life for herself within the walls of his home, but the world outside was still unforgiving. The very people Liam had surrounded himself with had shown their true colors. And it wasn't just Maya who had been hurt. It was the realization that people like her were always going to be seen as less than in the eyes of many. When he met her at the coffee shop a few days later, she looked tired but determined. Maya had always been composed, but now there was a weight to her presence, a sense of having borne too much for too long. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I'm leaving, Mr. Walker," Maya said, her voice steady. "I don't know how much more I can take. The way things were, how they are, it's never going to change." Liam didn't know what to say. He couldn't promise her that things would change overnight. He couldn't undo the damage that had already been done. But what he could do was listen, really listen. "I'm sorry, Maya," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I didn't see it, not until it was too late. I don't know if I can fix everything, but I can try, and I'll make sure people know the truth. About you. About what's been happening. It's not your fight alone anymore. I'm with you." Maya looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. She nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. "I appreciate that. But this isn't just about me, Mr. Walker. It's about all of us. It's about a system that's been in place for so long that it's ingrained in everything we do. People like you, people like Emily, have the privilege to ignore it. But people like me, we don't get that luxury." The weight of her words hit Liam like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the isolated incidents of racism or disrespect. It was the system, the culture, the way things had been set up to keep people like Maya in their place. People who were never seen as equals, who were forced to fight every day to prove their worth even when their worth was already unquestionable. "Maya," Liam began, his voice faltering. "What should I do?" She met his eyes, and for the first time in the entire conversation, she smiled. It wasn't a smile full of happiness, it was one of quiet understanding. "Start by listening, by speaking out, and by never letting this happen again. I know you want to change, but it has to come from more than just a few words. It has to come from action, real action." With that, she stood up, brushing the crumbs of her pastry from her lap. "I'll miss you, Mr. Walker, I really will. But I can't be a part of this anymore. I'm going to find my own path." And with that, she walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Liam with nothing but his own thoughts and a deep sense of regret. The impact of that moment, the pain of knowing he had failed her, stayed with him long after she was gone.